There are moments in the Cold War when the silence of the sky was broken, not by war, but by the possibility of it. A radar signal appears, unidentified, moving fast, heading toward defended airspace. No communication, no explanation, just a contact where there shouldn't be one. And in that moment, everything changes. Because in the Cold War, an aircraft approaching your airspace wasn't just a plane. It could be a message, a test, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. Fighters are scrambled, engines ignite, pilots race toward the unknown. Because once an unidentified aircraft crosses a certain line, there is no room for hesitation. This is the story of the moments when American fighters intercepted Soviet bombers, encounters that unfolded at the edge of conflict, where seconds mattered, and decisions could define everything that followed. At the height of the Cold War, the skies became an extension of the battlefield, not a place of constant combat, but of constant vigilance. Both the United States and the Soviet Union operated long-range bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons, aircraft designed to travel across continents, penetrate defenses, and deliver devastating payloads. For the United States, protecting its airspace became a priority of the highest level because the threat was not theoretical. It was real. Soviet bombers conducted patrols near American territory, testing response times, probing defenses, operating just close enough to send a signal, but not close enough to trigger war. It was a dangerous balance, one built on precision, because crossing that invisible boundary, even by accident, could escalate into something far beyond control. To respond to that threat, the United States built a system of constant surveillance, radar networks scanning the skies, early warning systems positioned across vast regions, command centers ready to respond within seconds. Because detection was only the first step, response had to be immediate. Fighter aircraft were placed on alert, pilots ready to launch at a moment's notice, engines prepared, weapons armed, waiting for a signal that could come at any time. And when that signal came, there was no delay. The scramble order was given. Pilots moved instantly, running toward their aircraft, climbing into cockpits, starting engines with practiced precision, because every second mattered. The longer it took to intercept, the closer the unknown aircraft would get. Within minutes, American fighters were airborne, climbing rapidly, guided by radar controllers. Vectors calculated in real time, positioning them to intercept a target they had not yet seen, only tracked, only understood through data. But soon, that data would become visual, because in the Cold War, interception was not just about stopping an aircraft. It was about identification, understanding intent, and sending a message that said, "You've been detected, you are not alone, and you will be watched." And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, when most tense moment happened without a single shot being fired, consider subscribing, because what these pilots would encounter in the sky was not just another aircraft. It was the physical presence of a rival superpower, just miles away, close enough to see, close enough to matter, and close enough to change everything if something went wrong. Guided by ground control, the fighters closed the distance, every movement calculated, every adjustment precise, because interception wasn't random. It was controlled, a coordinated effort between pilots in the air and operators on the ground. Inside radar stations, controllers tracked both aircraft, the unknown contact, and the interceptors racing toward it. Angles refined, speed calculated, altitude matched. Because to intercept a target moving at high speed, there was only one chance to get it right. Inside the cockpit, the pilots saw nothing yet, only instruments, coordinates, instructions coming through the radio. Short, direct, because clarity mattered. There was no time for confusion. Then, a shape appeared on the horizon, small at first, barely visible, but growing, closing the distance. The unknown was no longer just a signal. It was real, a large aircraft, heavy, distinctive in its shape. As the fighters approached, the outline became clear, a Soviet bomber, long range, capable of carrying nuclear weapons, now flying near American-controlled airspace. The tension in that moment was immediate, because this was no longer theoretical. Two opposing forces, operating within visual range of each other. The fighters moved into position, close enough to identify, but not close enough to provoke, maintaining distance, maintaining control, because every movement sent a signal. Too aggressive, and it could escalate. Too passive, and it could be interpreted as weakness. The pilot adjusted position slightly, aligning alongside the bomber, and for a moment, they were flying side by side, separated by distance, but connected by something much larger, the Cold War itself. The bomber crew knew they had been intercepted. They expected it. These encounters were part of the strategy, a demonstration, a test, a message, and the American pilot understood that as well, because the mission wasn't to engage. It was to observe, to confirm, to ensure the aircraft did not cross the line, that invisible boundary that defined peace. The bomber maintained its course. The fighters maintained their position, each watching the other, each aware of the stakes, because even a small deviation, a change in direction, a sudden maneuver could be misinterpreted, and misinterpretation in this environment could escalate quickly. Time passed slowly, even though the aircraft were moving at high speed, because in those moments, every second was measured, every action evaluated. Eventually, the bomber adjusted its course, turning away, moving back toward international airspace. The fighters followed briefly, ensuring the change was real, ensuring the threat was no longer present. And then they broke off, returning to base. Mission complete. No shots fired, no escalation, but the encounter had meaning, because both sides had demonstrated something: capability, readiness, control. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where entire confrontations unfolded in silence, just miles apart, consider subscribing, because what made these moments so important was not what happened, but what didn't, because each successful interception was a moment where tension did not turn into conflict. And in the Cold War, that mattered more than anything else. But not every interception felt controlled. Not every encounter followed a predictable pattern, because sometimes the situation developed faster than anyone expected. A contact would appear, closer than anticipated, moving at a speed or altitude that didn't match normal patterns. And in those moments, the margin for error disappeared. One such scenario began the same way as many others: a radar detection, an unidentified aircraft approaching monitored airspace. Fighters scrambled, controllers guiding them toward interception. But as the interceptors closed in, something was different. The bomber wasn't maintaining a steady course. It was adjusting, changing direction, subtle movements, but enough to create uncertainty. Inside the cockpit, the pilot felt it immediately, because a predictable aircraft is manageable. An unpredictable one is dangerous. The fighter moved closer, trying to establish visual confirmation, trying to understand intent. But distance closed quickly, faster than expected, and for a brief moment, the separation between the two aircraft became minimal. Too minimal, close enough to see details, markings, crew positions, close enough that any sudden maneuver would leave no time to react. Inside both aircraft, decisions were being made in real time. Adjust speed, adjust position, maintain control, because even a slight miscalculation at that distance could result in collision, or worse, a reaction that could be interpreted as hostile. The bomber shifted again, not aggressively, but enough to create tension. The fighter pilot had to respond, carefully, maintaining position without escalating, because any move toward the bomber could be seen as a threat, but pulling away too quickly could signal loss of control. This was the reality of close-range interception. Two aircraft, two crews, operating within meters of each other, each relying on discipline, training, and judgment, because there was no room for error, no margin for misinterpretation, and no second chance if something went wrong. In that moment, the Cold War wasn't happening across continents. It was happening right there, in the sky, between two pilots, both representing systems far larger than themselves. The fighter adjusted position slightly, creating space, reducing tension, a controlled move, measured, deliberate, and the bomber responded, stabilizing, returning to a steady course. The moment passed, but it left something behind, a realization that these encounters were not just symbolic, they were fragile, balanced on precision, dependent on restraint, because even without weapons being used, the potential for escalation was always present. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where the smallest decisions carry the greatest consequences, consider subscribing, because what these encounters revealed was that the line between control and chaos was often measured in meters, and in those meters, the outcome of something much larger could be decided. In the end, nothing happened. No missiles were fired, no aircraft were lost, no war began, and yet those moments mattered, because every interception was more than a routine mission. It was a test of systems, of training, of judgment, because the Cold War was not only fought with weapons, it was managed through control, through the ability to respond without escalating. The United States built a system designed to do exactly that. Radar networks that could detect threats early, command structures that could respond immediately, fighter aircraft capable of reaching any point of concern within minutes, and pilots trained not just to engage, but to think, to assess, to act with precision under pressure. That combination, technology and discipline, created stability in an unstable environment, because the goal was not just to stop an aircraft, it was to prevent the situation from becoming something more. Each interception sent a message that American airspace was protected, that any approach would be detected, that any movement would be observed, but also sent another message. That control would be maintained, that response would be measured, that escalation was not inevitable. For the Soviet side, these encounters served a similar purpose. They demonstrated capability, tested reactions, explored boundaries. Both sides understood the rules, even if those rules were never written. And as long as those rules were followed, the balance held. But the balance depended on something fragile: consistency, because the system worked only as long as every participant acted with restraint. Every pilot, every controller, every decision made in seconds, because one mistake, one misinterpretation could change everything. That is what makes these moments significant, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of risk, because these encounters happened repeatedly, quietly, unseen by the public, yet each one carried the same potential: to escalate or to stabilize. And time after time, they stabilized. That was the real achievement. Not dominance, not confrontation, but control, the ability to operate at the edge of conflict without crossing it. That is a legacy of these interceptions, a reminder that during the Cold War, the most important victories were often invisible, moments where nothing happened because everything was handled correctly. For more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because some of the most critical events in history didn't make headlines. They happened quietly, in places where a single decision could change the course of the world.